Hello and welcome back to Steampunk's GameSpot's PC Focus Show, where we talk about things that matter to PC gamers and the things that happen on your computer thing.
Yeah.
I'm Edmund Trand.
I'm Jess McDonald.
And this week we're going to be talking about our favorite PC games of 2018. So 2018 was a really great year for games, lots of great games, lots of great PC games as well. And so we're going to go through a few of our favorites and maybe you can let us know what you think down below. Anyway, Jess.
I think I just want to get started with the PC game I was most excited about this year, and I know you're a big fan of it too, Return of the Obra Dinn. It's a really unique, exciting game by Lucas Pope. It's one of those indie games where the entire game has been created by one person, the creator of Papers, Please.
Yep.
Unlike
one of my favorite games of all time.
Yes.
Can I just say.
Papers, Please is like really cool, but super depressing. It just got to a point for me where I just couldn't play it anymore because everyone kept dying. Everyone's already dead in this game, so you don't have that problem. But what you're doing is rocking up to the Obra Dinn, which is a ship. It's 1780 something, and you're there investigating what happened to the 60 crew members who have either gone missing or died.
You're an insurance auditor, which is like kind of a carrier from the mundane job of Papers, Please. So like you're not a detective or anything.
Right.
You're just here to like work out what happened so people can get their payouts.
Yeah. As you can imagine, it's been a lot of crazy things happened on that boat, and you're going to figure it out by inspecting the corpses that you find aboard the vessel, and it will play some audio of the final moment of that particular individual, and then reveal a tableau of some part of the ship and exactly what was happening at the moment of their death.
Yeah. It's still the scenes themselves are really intricate and like exciting, and they're full of actions even though they're not moving. The visual style is very impressive. It's like a monochromatic art style.
What I think is really interesting about this game is that it easily could have been a walking simulator, but what they've done is it's actually really quite difficult. And my favorite thing about this game is how it really respects the player's intelligence. So what you need to do with every single one of these 60 individuals who perished or went missing aboard the vessel is figure out who the person was based on very little information, how they died, and who killed them, if that's relevant. And it's way harder than it seems like it's going to be. You end up inspecting the most minute details, like where they might be standing in a sketch, or the bunk number that they were in, which you may see not in their death scene, but in a scene that they happened to be in like 4 chapters ago.
Yeah. All of these little scenes take place over the course of like a few weeks, I believe. And so I kind of compare it to a comic book. Like you get panels of like events that happen, but it's up to you to kind of piece together what happens in between the panels. Yeah. And so drawing those lines and sort of working out who's who and the backstories of everyone and how they came to that point is really satisfying. I think it's a super clever game. But my actual favorite game of the year is a game that I'm kind of cheating here because this game is cross-platform technically. That's all right. But it only came to Switch like really late in the year. And the game I'm talking about is Into the Breach, which came out on PC back in March, I think. So this is from the guys who made FTL, one of 2012's best games, and one of the sort of most enduring sort of indie strategy games that there is. So Into the Breach is their follow-up. We take control of a squad of mechs that have gone back in time to like try and save the Earth from like giant bugs. So very Pacific Rim. But the battles take place on an 8x8 isometric grid. The goal isn't really to kill the bugs on each map, but more to sort of...
because they just keep spawning.
Because they keep spawning. The goal is to kind of minimize damage to the existing structures, because the structures power your ability to operate, as well as protect certain objectives. You only spend a very limited amount of turns on each map, so mitigating the damage and like trying to hold out for a certain amount of time makes for a really interesting dynamic than just kill all the things. And the thing that really makes this work is how transparent the game is. So when a turn sets itself up, you can see exactly what each enemy is going to do once that turn is over.
The next turn,
The next turn. So like, okay, this bug's gonna hit a building, this bug's going to hit me, this bug's webbed me. Okay, what can I do to sort of stop the major objectives from being damaged, or how can I stop myself from being damaged? You can set up these intricate sort of solutions, like sort of like a choreographed ballet of pushes and pulls. A big thing in this game is sort of pushing and pulling enemies into sort of obstacles like water or like away from buildings and have them you know, slice the air or push them together until they can hurt themselves. And sort of working out the most optimal way to do that is really satisfying. So each turn is kind of like its own little puzzle. Things get a lot more interesting once you start unlocking the sort of 8 or 9 other squads, which sort of have interesting abilities like, you know, being able to ice an enemy, but also once you do that, you ice yourself. Seeing how all the different like elements sort of come into play and sort of the different things you can do with them is really interesting. And you know, this is a game that you can play over and over and over and over again. Like I've played this game at least once a week, you know, for the entire year. Every new run is kind of like a host of new puzzles and unique situations that you kind of need to use your wits and your abilities to get yourself out of. Deciding how to compromise each turn, especially in the harder difficulties, is really engaging too. I mean, this is a game where like you can say, okay, I'll just sacrifice this guy for the greater good this turn and like just deal with it. Definitely one of my favorite games this year, but maybe of all time. Like I think these guys know how to design a good-ass strategy game.
I gotta play more of this game.
Yeah.
All right, so the next game I want to talk about that I really loved on PC this year was Unavowed. And Unavowed, I think, is a game we talked about on this show earlier this year. It's a point-and-click adventure game by Wadget Games, who are one of the real like bastions of keeping point-and-click adventure games in the current 2018 zeitgeist. And this game is a really exceptional one. They tend to bring out like about a game a year.
I think Unavowed is actually one developed by Wadget Games. Like they publish a lot of really great works. This is one like they actually developed in-house. Dave Gilbert and co.
Yeah, and the thing I love about Wadget Games is their voice acting is superb, and they managed to take things that have been done time and time again. I mean, the game has fantasy elements that are injected into like an alternate reality in New York City. Like all these things have been done, but they seem to create characters that just avoid stereotypes and writing that makes you genuinely care about the characters without letting the characters fall into like a sassy persona or you're just the charismatic, or you're just like the beefcake. Like the characters genuinely, they feel like people, which I think is like part of what makes the story so interesting and what makes seeing where these characters go so interesting.
Yeah, the story has a really interesting premise too.
Yeah, so you've been possessed by a demon, which sounds insane and sounded insane to me when I hadn't played the game yet. But basically, you're trying to chase around what was happening while the demon was in your body. And you do that by joining this group called the Unavowed, who are kind of fantastical. There's a wizard in there, there's a djinn in there, but they all have quite grounded personalities as well. You'll basically go on quests and you'll be able to elect a certain amount of team members, which you'll gather as you go through the game. And the team members you have in your squad at the time will affect how you can engage with puzzles. There are things that will be available to do on each mission that you just can't do because you didn't elect the team member who's able to interact with that. So you have to approach things in a different way.
I feel like it's really straightforward, most of the puzzles, but the fact that you can bring your own squad and sort of customize your playthrough each time kind of feels like really nice and unique, and that squad-based aspect does make it feel like, oh, this is my playthrough of Unavowed.
If you're a fan of point-and-click adventure games, like this is a really interesting one. The characters are really relatable, the locations you go to are really interesting, and the plot points are not predictable, which I think is really interesting for any video game story, and is especially good for one that is like so connected to where the quests go, like this one.
Yeah, this is definitely the best new adventure game this year, I feel like. So point-and-click adventures are kind of a genre that you can only really get on PC, and like another one of those is strategy games, and like you can't really play hardcore strategy games on any other platform than PC.
Not easily.
And this year was a really good year for strategy games. Not only did you have a Civ expansion and a bunch of expansions for the Paradox stuff, like Stellaris and Europa Universalis and all those kind of hardcore ones, but also a few really, really good new ones. So Frostpunk is a game where you are sort of taking care of the last city on Earth, I think, or something like that. But it's basically the world is frozen over, and you have a community which is like building themselves around a sort of, it's like a furnace, like a giant furnace. And the whole thing with this game is like, you will probably fail. I think the story actually only goes for a limited amount of time, and they only just introduced an endless mode. So you're building a city in sort of rings around the furnace, which adds like a weird new dimension to sort of your city builders and sort of city planning and stuff. But the whole thing is like the furnace can only be so hot, you know, and so the further out you go, the colder things will be, the more unhappy people will be. So that there's a really nice dynamic in sort of managing the cold, managing the natural disasters, and sort of keeping your sort of citizens happy, and also sort of balancing your moral judgment. A big aspect in Frostpunk is dealing with how far you're willing to go to sort of make this new society and sort of keep people happy and fed and alive. And yeah, Frostpunk's just a really great game that keeps getting a bunch of new content. Another game that keeps getting new content is BattleTech, which is from Harebrained Schemes, who did Shadowrun Returns, and published by Paradox. And BattleTech also saw a Flashpoint expansion just come out. But if you like sort of mech strategy and sort of tactical strategy, and you like patience, and sort of like the nuance of like tactical warfare, BattleTech is like the game for you. It's just like a really nice sort of free-form tactical strategy game that takes place on giant maps, and like we can customize your mechs. It's just one of those games where if you know that you like the genre going into it, you're gonna have a lot of fun with it. And I think that's the best thing that can be really said about BattleTech. It's a very good game, and I enjoy it a lot. Yeah, very PC game.
PC game. Well, speaking of a genre that works particularly well on PC and games that are doing really interesting stuff with that genre, I think if you're a fan of Western RPGs, you really shouldn't go past Pillars of Eternity Deadfire this year.
Deadfire?
Deadfire. My accent getting in the way. It's a really, really good RPG, and if we lived in a world where Divinity 2 didn't come out last year, it would probably be the best WRPG for a really long time. Unfortunately, that game really does outshine this one, but it has more of that old school element, so if you're into that, if you're looking for more of a 90s to early 2000s vibe in your RPG, in your isometric RPG, this is the way to go. It's also added some new interesting elements. There's seafaring, which shockingly works really well, island exploration and stuff, and you run into a bunch of random events, and it's incredibly complicated with how you can customize your own character and your party, and the things that you will be able to do and the ways you'll be able to engage with the world will be affected by what you've sunk points into. So there's a ton of replayability here. The game world is just huge. Like, this is a game you'll just play for months and months, if not the year. There's plenty of ways to complete objectives in this game by being clever or by utilizing different abilities that you've given your characters instead of just slashing everybody to pieces, and that's really cool. If you finish Divinity and you're really like looking for your next RPG on PC, this one's the one to go for.
Sooner or later, we all have to wake up.
Do let us know in that comment section what your favorite PC games were from this past year. But for now, let's also talk about your comments on last week's video about the Fallout 76 PC controls not being so great. You guys had a lot to say about it and about the game in general, but we got one particular comment from SethMan75 on YouTube who said, "Looks like they have kept the same broken controls from Skyrim. Back then, modders would fix it and Bethesda would get away with it, but not now. Not good enough by a long shot." That's a really interesting point because, yeah, of course, modders, as we talked about last week, have solved a lot of the control and UI issues they weren't such big fans of in these Bethesda RPGs, but that's now not possible because the game is multiplayer.
Yeah, and I mentioned last week that just because it's kind of like been the norm in Bethesda games previously doesn't mean it's necessarily good. But yeah, modding is kind of what makes Bethesda games really great. You know, that's the kind of stuff that doesn't make me want to play Skyrim on any other platform other than PC, because I can get so many fixes and sort of add so much value to the game. And you know, yeah, like playing Fallout 76 just makes me want to go back and play Fallout New Vegas with a bunch of like really awesome mods. You know?
Yeah, I mean, they've alluded to the fact that mods will come, but exactly what those mods are going to be and if it will actually enable fixes for stuff like that is hard to say.
Elsewhere, Cameron said on the keyboard and mouse / controller statement, "As a long-time Battlefield player, you're doing your teammates a disservice on PC if you regularly pilot vehicles without a controller. Keyboard and mouse equals shooting, controller equals driving. Each are just better at their respective areas of use due to how specific the needs are." Yeah, I think that's really a good point. Like, have you ever tried to fly a plane with a keyboard and mouse?
Yeah.
Like, it's impossible. Like, I don't know, every time I play Battlefield, I feel like I need to have the same thing, like controller there when I get in a vehicle, and the keyboard and mouse for shooting. It's really hard to sort of manage that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it seems excessive, like when I think about it, but that completely makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, especially when you're on a team and like it's your responsibility.
Yeah.
Like, it makes sense that you should have the control scheme that you need to excel in multiplayer if that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
That's everything we have for you guys this week, but do let us know down in the comments what your favorite PC games were, and we'll be back next week with the PC games we didn't think were so good this year. So be sure to come back for that.